This is a Scipio Prime commander review. Scipio Prime kind of does a little bit of everything. He's got an insane amount of damage on his primary skill. He's got a debuff, making him effectively a support. He's got a damage reduction that makes him very tanky in the field. And all that on top of it, he's got a shield. So he does a little bit of everything. In this video, we're going to cover his skills, his talents, what you should do for your formations, and who you should pair him with to be effective in the field. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so first we're going to cover the skills. Scipio's first skill is a 2000 damage factor 3 target skill that debuffs the enemy for 30% of their health. This is huge in the meta because health is such a big part of it. Your gear for cavalry is very heavily health. A lot of infantry commanders also use a lot of health. Health is one of the few defensive stats archers desperately need, so you're further decreasing their health that's already low, making them additionally vulnerable to cavalry. So it's a perfect support skill because even if you can't hit that archer, that's going to make it easier for your cavalry allies to do that. On top of that, the 2000 damage factor on 3 targets, even at 15% reduction for each additional target, you're applying an effective 4200 damage factor skill, which is still more than double what it is. So that's very useful as well, and it does a lot of damage. You'll see a lot of chip damage in your reports because of it. His second skill is a 40% attack boost that gives you 15% march speed at all times, and then up to 25% when you're off Alliance territory. This is amazing for ruins. This is amazing for altars. It's great for trying to control the field around a position like a garrison because you're going to get that extra mobility, which is going to make it hard for anybody to pin you down. Even a prospective cavalry march, it's going to be a lot harder for them to stick to you, and chances are they're going to get separated from the group, whereas if you move slower, you could get swarmed down by multiple enemies. The third skill is a 20% health bonus when attacking troops, meaning if you're retreating or if you are defending, it's not as effective, it's not in effect. And it's a 10% chance to deal continuous additional damage for 3 seconds at 500 each, so 1500 effective once every 8 seconds. This is pretty great, honestly, and really helps keep him sustained between the health because you're going to be doing a lot more attacking than running. And the damage factor is nice, but it just is kind of a bonus on top of that. The health alone would have been great for this commander. The fourth skill is a 50% chance to reduce a damage by 30% when you take skill damage, which is basically Saladin's skill, but triggered once every 8 seconds. But in addition, you get a shield that's about half of an Alexander shield, which is pretty great. And it's once every 8 seconds. It's pretty nice. At a 50% rate, that is huge. So basically, every other round of skill damage taken is going to give you a half of a full skill's worth of shield. So that is, on a passive, very useful, and it is surprisingly effective once it starts triggering. It doesn't seem like it will be in the moment, but it would. And with the high damage factors of the likes of Liang, Nevsky, Joan Prime, it's going to trigger more often. In fact, part of the reason why Scipio Prime's had the staying power that he has is Joan Prime's double trigger. Each trigger can trigger that shield. So you have 3 chances at 50% chance each to trigger a shield, which is super, super useful. And against any skill tree opponents, it's the same thing. His expertise is actually a new thing, and it's not added to a different skill. It's 10% skill damage, which is useful, and then 30% faster rage growth when silenced. So the 30% rage growth doesn't really happen as often as you think it does, but the 10% skill damage, of course, is still super useful. And then when paired with everything else, it's already kind of an overloaded basic kit. He's very solid. Because of the fact that this kit is very basic, at a basic level is very overloaded, and you don't necessarily need the expertise, many players will go for a incomplete on expertise commander, and for that I recommend 5-5-5-1. As this 10% damage factor in the shield can still trigger every 8 seconds, it's just at a lower rate if you really wanted to save some gold heads. Or if you wanted to skip out on the march speed, you could, but I really do not recommend it because that 25% march speed is invaluable to use a field march. Now that we've touched base on the overall skills and how they work, let's go over to the talents. Now, the talents are going to be varied based on what you prefer. This is what I prefer due to the fact that the versatility tree is pretty mediocre. I like to go with 2 of 5 on Cage of Thorns just for the march speed debuff, because you could hit 3 targets with that debuff and then slow them down by 10%, which when combined with your 25% move speed is going to make it very hard for any target you want to hit to get away. Hold the line is a must-have if you are using anything that's all infantry, and with Scipio Prime you probably should be using all infantry. So hold the line at 4 out of 4 is an absolute must-have. Some other talents that you want to keep in mind is that you get 150 rage when you use a skill here. You've got 6 march speed here, 6% health here, and hasty departure, which means when you leave a structure, you get 60% march speed for the next 10 seconds. This is one of the most underrated talents in Rise of Kingdoms, both for hunting farms, like as a Cao Cao, it is a staple of that, and a staple of Joan Prime doing the same. But not only that, it is a staple for any march that has it, that is a field march, because in applications such as a field fight where you're trying to control an area, you can hop into a food node or a wood node and get that 60% march speed to hit somebody. And then when you do that, you can then apply Cage of Thorns to them to slow them down on top of your 25% move speed. So you're gaining 85%, taking 10% of them away, which almost flips the table on like even the speediest march. So keep that in mind. Other things are reduced skill damage taken here, an additional skill damage taken reduction here, and overall just as much rage as you can gain as well. As the support tree is actually a very underrated tree, and a very underappreciated tree due to the fact that the skill tree is as broken as it is. But as I said, just go 2 out of 5 on Cage of Thorns and stick with these talents. And I find that these give me the best results in the field, and the players that use Scipio Prime most often in our kingdom get the best results using this one. Okay, now that we've covered the talents, let's go on to equipment and armaments. For equipment, I usually stick with the same set just because I don't have a lot of variety to set 2 different sets. I use, like I said, I use technically 0 out of 6 on the infantry set, but you can go 2 out of 6 if you prefer. The reason I don't go for 2 out of 6 is because I'm going to be eventually replacing these 2 with Siege and Conquest items anyway. So I could go for 2 for 6 out of these, but they had better accessibility and I had better blueprints at the time. You could go up to 4 out of 6 because the 4 out of 6 bonus gives you 10% march speed. If you do, I recommend you doing it on weapon, helm, gloves, and boots, as the Hope Cloak and Eternal Night are just so useful and they replace attack with defense, which is a huge deal. For accessories, I recommend Horn and Ring, which is the standard suite for infantry commanders in general, but are especially useful for Scipio Prime due to the high skill damage getting even higher, and then the Rage allowing you to cast more skills, which casts more debuffs, which in general helps your allies more. For formations, you have a couple of options. Wedge makes sense if you want to do damage. It is just generally useful and generally beneficial. You can use triple line if you want to be a little more mobile. If you use hollow square to increase your shield effectiveness, but that requires specialty inscriptions, whereas wedge is just more skill damage and you can just generally stack it. And due to the fact that wedge works with so many other commanders, you have a better chance of having more of those armaments since you're probably going to be focusing on them, which gives you a chance to have better armaments overall. Inscription wise, you want to focus on anything that gives you move speed, health, damage dealt, or damage reduction. Of course, your specialty inscriptions as well are going to be good on any of those formations I mentioned, due to the fact that you have a shield, you have a high skill damage factor skill, and you have mobility. So any of those inscriptions for those specific armaments and formations are just going to be even more compounding. Okay, now that we have covered the armaments, formations, and equipment, let's talk about pairings. So, your pairing is going to be based on how you want to play. Since Scipio does damage well, he does support well, he does tank well, you can pair him up with any commanders that fit that. So, for example, for damage, you probably want to pair him with Guan, because the damage put out by Guan, AoE plus the Scipio damage put out, is just super useful. If you want to do something like support or tank, my recommendation is actually, believe it or not, Alexander. Because you can then stack the shields that you have with a standard shield here. A damage vulnerability plus a health debuff on 3 enemy troops is huge. On top of the fact that you're shielding an ally. And then you have a chance to deal additional damage to the target and reduce its healing, which is... The healing is not as much, but a 1700 damage factor on a normal attack is kind of crazy. And then, of course, 30% march speed on top of the 25% you're getting off Alliance territory means 55% march speed on an infantry march. It's super great. And then when not shielded, you have 40% increased attack, which is but the 30% increased defense is going to have higher uptime because Scipio Prime is going to put it up a shield as well. So you're going to theoretically have a lot more uptime for your shields, which gives you a lot more benefit of the defense buff, which helps your survivability, which helps you get off more skills, which then helps you debuff the enemy more, both on Scipio's skill and on Alexander's skill. So overall, I think that's a very sneaky, positive, and good pairing that actually was first brought to my attention by Vengador here in 2057. But it's just super useful, and I think it's great, especially for players who are first transitioning to Season of Conquest. This is an excellent value, because you could just take that Alexander that you've been using for the last 2 KvKs and put him with one new commander, and you've got a very, very solid B+ to A- pairing. But overall, either way you choose, it's going to be beneficial for you. It's just going to be your preference. And similarly, you want to change your formation to fit that. So, for example, if you're using Alexander, you're probably more likely to use Hollow Square because you can get the shield buff on both your shields. Whereas with Guan, you're going to want Wedge maybe because you got more damage. But then you could also use Hollow Square on Guan because Guan does more damage when shielded. But it'll also depend on what you have available for armaments, and that's what's great about Scipio Prime 2, is that he has a lot of extra coverage for different situations and has a lot of ability to take pretty much any formation, any armament, any equipment that you have. But with that, we will wrap up our discussion on Scipio Prime. What do you think? Do you think you're going to be using him? I think his debuff is one of the best in the game, and then when you compare him with the tankiness of infantry too, and just being able to stay around, even though he still puts out a lot of damage, he is just so invaluable as a support to me that I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. Even if new commanders come out that are stronger than him, his use as support is just invaluable. But let me know what you think in the comments. What commander should I cover next? And as always, good luck, fight well, and I will see you on the battlefield.